Welcome back. Thank you for joining us again for another great session this morning on our final day of the LANO virtual conference. I'm going to turn it over to Christian Beatty at this time to introduce our speaker.
Hello, thank you for joining us today with looking back and forward what we've learned during the pandemic and what it means for the future of nonprofit advocacy with David Thompson. For those of you just logging into our conference, I'm Christian Beatty, the Associate Director at LANO, and Jill Rothschild, our Executive Director, is also with us. As a reminder, we will have Q&A after David finishes, and we ask that all questions go in the chat box. We will do our best to answer all questions at the end of the presentation. PDFs of the slides will be available later on, along with recordings next week. David L. Thompson is Vice President of Public Policy for the National Council of Nonprofits, the nation's largest network of nonprofit organizations. The organization is active at the local, state, and federal levels, advancing nonprofit policy priorities in the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of the government. Through its member state associations and nonprofit allies, the Council of Nonprofit amplifies the voices of America's local community-based nonprofit organizations. Hello, David. Thank you, and welcome. We're so happy to have you today.
Thank you. Glad to be here. This is like the fourth or fifth time they've tried to schedule this event. So
it is.
Congratulations to the perseverance of LANO. And for all of you who are attending today, it's your third day. Congratulations. We outside in the rest of the country, outside of Louisiana, have the most amazing respect for what you all have been through. We've seen it in the news. We've been praying for you, contributing, supporting. We've reached out to LANO to find out what can we do. State associations across the country. Let's go to the next slide. State associations across the country have engaged or have suffered through natural disasters and all kinds of challenges. We've learned from Louisiana. Louisiana has learned from other states. So this is the most wonderful thing about nonprofit networks is that we talk to each other, we engage, we learn from each other, and we share. On the screen there, you'll see the network of the National Council of Nonprofits. LANO is an early and engaged member of our network, 25,000 members across the country. If you are a member of LANO, you're a member of the National Council of Nonprofits, welcome and thank you. If you are not a member of LANO yet, please join. Because as I'm going to say, numbers matter, collective action matters in this COVID crisis from the advocacy side and the engagement side. Our network is not just advocacy, but we do have wins across the country. We have challenges across the country that we can all address. So we're all in it together. We all care about our missions. We care about our communities. So this network, I am very proud to be a participant in, a contributor to, because it's through the election, the collective action, the collective engagement of this network all over the country that we are able to accomplish amazing things. Next slide, please. If there's anything I say that you want to follow up on, you can always track me down or the National Council through LANO or through our Twitter account. You see the handle there, or through our newsletters. LANO is a co-brander, so you should have just gotten an email from us 2 days ago. Nonprofit Advocacy Updates. We just changed the name. It comes out every 2 weeks, and then there's a monthly newsletter. These are important because when LANO puts out a groundbreaking report, we want the rest of the country to know about it. And we identify trends, challenges, and we like to brag about nonprofits. So please read and please contribute. Please help us spread the good news about what's going on in Louisiana. Next slide, please. Okay, this is kind of my title page, but for the last 8 months, this book, Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Nobel Prize winner, has been in my mind. But next slide. We're going to modify it to Advocacy in the Time of COVID. I think that's hilarious. You may be moaning or not paying attention, but anyway. We're going to cover 3 things. Short amount of time, want to be concise and get to your questions. The first is COVID and public policy, a case study. What the heck happened back in March and how does that affect our lives? Next is the current landscape, and I'm literally going to be looking to the screen to my left because things are changing hourly and minute by minute. So I want to give you the up to the minute news as it comes along. So of the challenges at the federal, state, and local level, current landscape, and then talk about what have we learned, how does this affect going forward, nonprofit advocacy going forward. Next slide, please. The pandemic hit. The president announced a national emergency. March 13th, Washington, D.C. emptied as fast. Rats sinking a ship from a sinking ship. Use whatever analogy you want. There are a lot of empty boardrooms throughout Washington. Congress kept going, but the city itself was dead. You could walk down the middle of the street and not see a car for a long time. You had the same experience probably in every town throughout Louisiana as well. But that image there is nobody's in the office doing what they usually do. We had to improvise. Next slide, please. Congress scrambled. We had the economy was shutting down, horrendous health crisis, lots of other problems. So there was a mad scramble to legislate in March of 2020. Two big bills that were enacted by I think they were unanimous, spending $3 trillion that we're still living under to some extent. I want to explain some details of each one because they didn't just happen automatically. Next slide, please. The Families First Act. The actual name is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That came originally from the House, the Democratic-controlled House, and it had a lot of things in it, including the mandated paid leave. Very complicated. If you joined either of our big webinars in March 30th or April 7th, you heard that the paid leave provisions, paid sick leave, paid family leave, were very complicated. And I won't go into the details unless you want me to, but because the purpose here is what did we learn and how can we go forward with advocacy. It was complicated, and it only applies to employers with 500 or fewer employees. Larger employers were carved out, but it was the smaller employers had to provide paid leave up to a cap. It also included refundable payroll tax credits. I don't know if any of you have ever used or experienced refundable payroll tax credits, but they're pretty sweet. And they were put in the law because of a decade of nonprofit advocacy. Typically, when Congress wants to help employers employ people, they enact income tax credits. We're tax exempt. We don't pay income taxes. And unprofitable for-profit businesses don't pay income taxes either. So it's of no benefit. We've been advocating, our network, remember that map that I showed you? Our network has been advocating for 10 years to get Congress to respect nonprofits and recognize that we're 10% of the workforce. Our employees are vitally important to the economy and the well-being of communities, kind of the message we usually used. And when this bill was written late at night, they remembered all that nagging, cajoling we'd been doing for a decade, and included the refundable payroll tax credit. We pay payroll taxes. The refundable means we get money back from the federal government, even if we haven't paid that much in payroll taxes in the first place. This was a huge win. When they were first talking about it, back in early March, or March 13th, 14th, 15th, I sent an email at like 11 o'clock at night to a Hill contact and wrote, "This is going to be a payroll tax credit." And the person wrote back, "Yes, refundable." You may have heard me whoop it up in excitement. It was a very big deal. That was nonprofits getting respect and being included. So that essentially the Families First Act holds nonprofit harmless. We want to provide leave and so forth. Maybe we couldn't afford it. This meant that nonprofits could be ideal employers and support. So that was a big deal, but it didn't just happen. It was because of longstanding nonprofit advocacy. Next slide, please. The next item is the CARES Act. CARES is coronavirus aid and RES. I don't remember what the rest of that means, but there are key provisions in there that were not automatic. It was the Paycheck Protection Program run through the Small Business Administration. I learned from folks in Louisiana after Katrina that the Small Business Administration is not a natural ally and usually smites or ignores charitable nonprofits if they can. The statute is kind of screwy and anti-nonprofit. There are some exceptions, but the staff tend not to be pro-nonprofit. I say this not as a complaint, but just as a reality. When the when the CARES Act first draft came out, and it came in the Senate, it was the Senate Republicans proposed the first version of the CARES Act. The PPP part of it was not very friendly. It used odd terms like it only applied to private nonprofits, which is not a term in law. It cut out about 20,000 nonprofits that were eligible to participate in Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement programs. That very broad language was put in there because the chairman of the Small Business Committee did not want the Planned Parenthood to get PPP loans. So they did this broad swipe of the nonprofit community to prevent the one group from having access. Through advocacy, we were able to change the language to what it is in the law now that directly affects you, and to take out some of the worse language. It was still capped at 500 employees. We are still working to fix that. That was a significant problem. We're still working to fix that. Employee retention tax credit, that's the same issue as the paid leave issue. It's a refundable tax credit, refundable payroll tax credit, that same 10 years of past lobbying they put in here. Unemployment. Some of you are contributing employers, some of you are reimbursing employers, and some of you don't contribute to the system at all if you are a faith-based organization or you have fewer than 5 employees. As originally written, it did not cover enough nonprofits, so that language had to be changed. It's still not good enough, and I'll get into that, but it's still a problem. And then the last issue on that list is the universal deduction. There was nothing in there originally, and through a long series of advocacy and nagging over the past 10 years, nonprofits were successful in getting a small universal deduction. Hopefully you all know this. Hopefully you've already taken advantage of it for your organization fundraising. But just to refresh, the law for the very first time since 1986 at least, includes a provision that even if a taxpayer takes the standard deduction, that taxpayer can still deduct $300 for donations to charitable nonprofits. It only applies to this year, and it's only $300 whether for an individual or a couple. But it's something. It's more than nothing. The champion of that bill is Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, which is kind of close to you in Louisiana. His name will come up a couple more times. But it was included because nonprofits have been consistently advocating on these issues. Let's go to the next slide, because this is how we got there. And I'm going through all this as a case study of it didn't just happen. We didn't vote for wonderful people who naturally looked out for the needs of nonprofits. This was a great deal of work over a 2 or 3 week period of time. Our coalition, so many of you work with national nonprofits, they're part of our coalition. I can almost guarantee it. Our network is well represented. Networks of state associations, nonprofits are well represented. We've been talking every day, calls 7:30 in the morning for the steering group, the 11:30 in the morning, and we have other groups who talk, communications group, a mid-sized nonprofits group, state-focused group, and grassroots groups meet on a regular basis to compare notes to keep pushing forward. Typically, when your legislature's in session, groups will meet once a week. Every day, several times. I've been staring at this camera on my screen for the last 8 months, and it's been staring back. We also had sign-on letters. Hopefully you've seen these. The reason we were effective on the Families First Act is because of this document. You'll see about 68, 69 national nonprofits all signed on. Those are their logos. Then we did, after the CARES Act, we've been advocating like crazy. This is about 200 logos on this page. 4,000 nonprofits have signed on. Hopefully you all have signed on to the nonprofit community letter. Those have an amazing impact. The pretty logos and the color is the first catches the eye, but the numbers of nonprofits from every single state has an immense impact. That's some grassroots work we've been doing. We had, over a very rapid period of time, we had to share key contacts. Lobbyists don't like letting everybody else know who the right person is in this office or that office, or who they have contacts with. It didn't matter. It was such a crisis. We all for one and one for all, which is just what happens when a crisis comes, and I'm trying to share what we discovered that you can benefit from. We also did, we did direct lobbying through emails, but we also did grassroots of you doing emails, of calling and writing and signing on and things like that, all in a very quick period of time. And we did legislative drafting, something you sometimes do at the state level. You don't do it as much at the federal level because there are all kinds of people who think it's their job on Capitol Hill. This was so quick. We were effective because we would state the problem, define the solution, and then provide the legislative language of fixing it. For instance, with the PPP, they had written in their private nonprofits. We scratched that out, told them why that's not a term of law, and then gave them the paragraph that made sure that you got the loans. So it was very quick, coordinated activity with law firms, with lobbyists, with experts, and so forth. And then media outreach to make sure the news media was reinforcing the message that nonprofits are vital, nonprofits have to be included. So I go through all that to share that this did not happen automatically. It was not simple and easy. It happened because a whole lot of people, including you, stood up and they got the point across. And we made some major victories, things that the universal deduction. We've been at it for 10 years. We finally got it in a little bit. That's a big fix. Unemployment was better. Paycheck protection program. Many of you got thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars because of that. That was because of the advocacy work. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying it takes effort. We don't rely on politicians to do the right thing, and we do rely on nonprofits working together. And that was a great example of that. Next slide, please. This is the transition point. That was then, this is now. And I'm looking at my screen, as I said, because things are on the Senate floor today. No action for months. Things are working today and last night and so forth. Next slide, please. Where we stand, very quickly, Christian said it in the introduction, but here's a graphic explanation. Our network focuses on over here on the column on this side is federal, state, local, or local, state, federal. So all levels of government, but also all branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial. All these matter because all of them affect nonprofits. You can see the pentagram or whatever that is with all those arrows. That shows that there's great interplay. So we can't just focus on one, can't just focus on Congress, because everybody else could hurt us and some of the others can help us. Next slide, please. I want to run through where we stand on the stimulus legislation. The federal stimulus, there's the bill that the letter that I mentioned earlier, signed on by 4,000 nonprofits. That's called the Nonprofit Community Letter. There are four big issues that we're focusing on, and those are the four listed here. Paycheck Protection Program extension. If you have a loan, you know that the program has expired. We want to extend it for a second round. We also want to make sure that mid-sized, larger nonprofits can access forgivable loans. So if you have 600 employees in Louisiana or within your network as an affiliated group, we want you to get a forgivable loan. A bill introduced last night, it's an all Senate Democrat bill, takes care of almost everything we've asked for in those first two issues. So it applies to a broader set of nonprofits. It's the same language that passed the House about 3 weeks ago. So the Democratic bill does much better for nonprofits than the Paycheck Protect than the Senate Republican bill that was brought up yesterday and did not proceed. But these bills introduced last night in the Senate, this language passed the House last month, It's not going to be introduced, not going to be voted on as a freestanding bill, but it's designed to be the language that goes into a COVID relief bill if they ever reach agreement. So that's the first two items. The next item is unemployment benefits. There, Senate Democrats are actually more friendly to nonprofits than House Democrats. Senate Republicans more friendly than House Democrats. Current law says that self-insured, and hopefully you know if your organization refunds the government, the state trust fund for unemployment benefits paid, or whether you're a contributing employer. And I can explain that if anyone asks a question. The CARES Act covers half of the costs that nonprofits have to pay. And if you're a reimbursing employer, you're paying now. Louisiana did a wonderful job. I'll come back to that. We're trying, currently is 50%. We're trying to get it up to 100% coverage so that nonprofits don't have to pay unemployment costs right now in the midst of a recession and a pandemic. Senate Republicans have been a little friendlier to us on that. The next item, and that's still a question mark on that issue. Next item is the universal charitable deduction. $300 is a great first step. We want to go a couple more steps. The Senate bill that's on the floor, that's on the floor today, would expand the above the line deduction from $300 to $600 for individuals and $1,200 for couples. It's only for 2020, but we're working to get it into a final bill, and we're working to get it to extend it to through 2021, because there's not much time left in the year. And if they don't get around to passing a bill until the end of November, that gives you 1 month to take advantage of it. So we're pushing, we're nagging and cajoling. And if you're getting any comments from your national nonprofit colleagues, please respond. If you're getting messages from LANO, please respond. All of these issues need to be finalized in the next few weeks. Not likely to happen before the election, but hopefully in November. So these things are all very live issues that would greatly benefit nonprofits and the work we do. There's also this year, there will be spending bills. Eventually there will be austerity. This year is probably the last of the drunken sailor spending. And come January, we expect spending to shrink, regardless of who's elected president. And so that's going to require more advocacy work. And there's some other bills must pass that I'm going to skip just to move on. Next slide, please. At the state and local level, we have lots of issues that we, the National Council of Nonprofits, track across the country that I wanted to share with you. And I'll be quick, but again, ask questions to go back. Unemployment insurance. Early in the pandemic, your governor put out a proclamation saying that reimbursing employers, self-insured reimbursing employers, will have 100% of their costs covered. That expired. And my understanding, and maybe you know it, are you having to pay it or not? Please share in the chat box if you are having to pay, and if you know the status. I don't. But your trust fund was funded at $1 billion at the beginning of the pandemic, which is a good number. You're now running out of money, so the state has borrowed $70 million and has the authority to borrow $200 million from the federal government to keep your unemployment trust fund solvent. It's going to have to pay that money back, which means that for contributing employers, your rates are going to go up. So we're working try to get Congress to pay for more of that, but there are some solutions throughout the country that other states have accomplished that would benefit Louisiana. So stay tuned there. Liability, that should say liability protections. I know that there were a couple of bills in Louisiana considered but did not pass. It's a big issue at the federal level. I think about 17 states enacted liability protection bills for organizations, for-profits, nonprofits, governments that reopen. If they follow the rules, they can't be sued, or there are limited litigation options and so forth. You could say that's a great idea or a bad idea, but it's something that is likely to be on the agenda next time your legislature convenes. COVID funds. You may know the CARES Act provided billions of dollars to Louisiana under the coronavirus Coronavirus Relief Fund, CRF. Some states have taken that money and provided loan programs to nonprofits or to fund, let's say, to pay out, to pay down or cover your costs for unemployment, or loan programs to nonprofits or grant programs and things like that. I don't know the answer to this question. What did Louisiana do? Has Louisiana used its CRF money? Has it helped granted to nonprofits? Please share, because we're trying to keep track of it. In many states, charitable giving, recognizing that charitable nonprofits are stepping up during the pandemic. Some states, I believe Utah and New Jersey, are looking at creating better charitable giving incentives, charitable deductions within their state tax laws. Don't know if you have money to do it, but it may be something that you want to look at as good proactive legislation. As it shows here on the screen, the purple, blue, gold, and green picture, the money flows from the federal government to the states, or from the states to, the money flows many different ways. Austerity is coming. We're expecting the federal government to spend less, which usually means the state government gets less and has less to spend. That usually means the states spend less, share less with the state government, with local governments. And always that means that they tend to look at nonprofits as the first opportunity to cut spending. They may still want to build a road and pay a for-profit road builder to build a road, but they want to cut human services or education or community services and things like that. So it's something we all have to anticipate and be on guard for. That last item on the screen is taxes, fees, and pilots. Those are all in one line because it really doesn't matter to a local government or to the state government how they get the money from nonprofits. Those are usually the ways. You remember, I think it's happened again, but several years ago, probably 8 or 9 years ago, Mayor Landrieu was trying to change the Louisiana Constitution so that the city of New Orleans could tax charitable nonprofits. That did not prevail, but many a city wants to tax the property of tax-exempt nonprofits, or they want to charge fees, or they want to demand payments in lieu of taxes. Governments love nonprofits when they're promoting us, when they're promoting bring your business, move to our state type of thing. But they tend to turn on us when they run out of money. So it's with austerity coming, we're expecting spending cuts that will be adversely affect nonprofits, and we're expecting taxes, fees, pilots as well. Next slide, please. I want to pick up my pace a little bit. This is to flag the reality that the governor, the president, the executive branch, attorney general, and so forth can take actions that positively or adversely affect nonprofits. Executive orders, there's a new executive order from President Trump banning trainings that focus on implicit bias, race equity, a variety of things. I was just on a conference call earlier, about an hour ago, with the Department of Labor, where they're talking about wanting information about your training program so they can write up some enforcement, some guidance and enforcement proceedings. This is disrupting trainings in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion. Nonprofits are very concerned. For-profits are very concerned. The executive can also change funding streams or provide relief. The reopening issue is one of great interest. This picture on the screen there is our counterpart organization, LANO's counterpart organization in Oklahoma, put together a reopening guide for nonprofits. A lot of state associations have tapped into that, but it's a good resource for how to follow the rules, what to watch out for, a checklist, things like that. And then public service loan forgiveness, the Department of Education at the federal level sometimes does it right, sometimes does it wrong, but that is a moving target. The executive branch is just one example. Education department can mess up the rules for this long-standing program. It's a program that encourages people to work for charitable nonprofits and government, and then get their loans forgiven. But the rules are a moving target. So we advocate at the administrative level just to make sure nonprofits are protected. Next slide, please. Judicial, there's going to be a vote on Monday on the 9th Supreme Court justice. The docket itself has a variety of cases there. There will be challenges to the census memos and rules, challenges to the president's tax returns, challenges to the executive order on implicit bias trainings and things like that. Nonprofits are going to be heavily involved in the U.S. Supreme Court, but also our network engages at the state court level as well, because states don't always get it right, and nonprofits need to protect our communities. So I tell you this just to reiterate that advocacy isn't just legislative. It isn't just when the legislature is in session. We can advocate for nonprofit missions through the judiciary, through the executive branch, fixing regulations, all that wide array of things. Next slide, please. This is the real purpose of this call. And I want to pause for a moment. If there are any questions, Christian, you can go ahead and chime in. But you remember that this is advocacy goes in all different directions, legislative, executive, judicial, federal, state, local, or local, state, federal. Next slide, please. I want to talk about hands-on advocacy of nonprofit engagement to make sure all the laws, the policies are working for us, working for you, working for your mission, and the people you serve. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this page because this is a collection of what we've learned, what works. Remember the case study stuff that I talked about at the beginning of the rush to get it done. Started the very crisis 3 weeks, and then that 3 weeks is expanded. You can't see it, but my arm's going 3 miles down the road. It's been 8 months. It feels like 8 years. It feels like 80 years. Many calls a day and so forth. But we've learned some things along the way. What works? Virtual works. All of us hated it to start with, but we've gotten benefits from the virtual reality in which we are living. Our conference room tables aren't having meetings anymore. They're collecting dust. But our Zoom cameras and our team and every other format is working for us when we've worked them. Our audiences are larger. That picture that you see there of the Zoom shot, that was just one of my 7:30 calls. There are actually about 20 women on the call too who weren't on the picture that day. But we have regular calls, and you really do, body language matters. So the in-persons are working. Have you found the same thing, that once the pandemic hit, audiences were much bigger? We did 2 webinars on those 2 bills that I talked about at the very beginning. We had 21,000 people register for the 2 different events, largest audiences we've ever had. And where an audience may typically be 100 people, we were seeing 1,000. So, and that's not just us, others are reporting the same thing. More people can engage through virtual, through this format. So we have to rethink how we do presentations to make sure we take advantage of the broader audience. We've also found that policymakers are they didn't have anything to do. They were shut in just like we were. So we found that governors and legislators and senators and members of Congress are looking for events to participate in. So we had, I know in Oklahoma and Kentucky, our folks have weekly calls. And Senator McConnell has been on the Kentucky call. Senator Langford is a regular viewer or participant in the Oklahoma call. And many states have been doing this. Policymakers are looking for audiences, and the virtual reality all of a sudden has become a tool that we've never had like we used to have before. It used to be at the LANO conference, the governor might come. Now with virtual, because we're all used to it, governors are coming on calls on a much more regular basis. So it's more of the town hall setting and more of the community setting. And it reminds them that nonprofits matter. It's an opportunity for nonprofits to do things or to communicate. We've also been doing virtual news conferences where reporters come and you have 5 or 10 nonprofits telling their story. Much more effective, and it gets the media together. We did a virtual Hill briefing series. We did a nonprofit week in July, where each day was a different issue that nonprofits are dealing with. I was involved with the unemployment insurance. So we had 3 different speakers from 3 different states, targeting key legislators and things like that. And we had hundreds of Hill staffers participate. So we were able to do things cheaper and more effectively. So it works, and our audiences are better. Numbers also matter. I'll show you one more time. This letter with 4,000 newspapers are linking to that letter, because with 4,000 nonprofits is an impressive number. So big numbers are working during this. Yes, they worked in the past, but for whatever reason, nonprofits showing solidarity in large numbers really is having the desired effect of politicians saying, oh, now I better pay attention. News media using that as their hook. So numbers matter. Substance, not sizzle. What that means is, remember earlier I said when we were talking about problems with the legislation, we stated the problem, we explained the solution in common terms, regular English, and then provided them the legislative language to fix it. They're moving fast. They aren't sitting in a room together either. So they need it in an email. They need it crisp and short. We've learned how to write things more succinctly than we ever have in the past. I'm still learning that. But by being the experts, we know nonprofits, and we work with nonprofit lawyers and so forth. We bring the expertise. I've never had it this easy, let me say. Because of the pandemic, because of the new realities, it's easier for nonprofits to identify the problems and the solutions and then get them included. Working the phones, this was the strangest observation for me. We work with senators and legislators. We are members of Congress. We talk to state legislators at National Council of Nonprofits. We do that too. And we talk with staff. We try to talk to staff and the elected officials all the time. We found during the pandemic that they're sitting at home by their phones just like everybody else. So we found that we actually got to have some meaningful conversations with those people that we've been wanting to talk to forever. We got that opportunity, and now we have their personal cell phone numbers. So there are some benefits to this pandemic. Strange bedfellows work as well. We and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce led a letter with 100, they got 180 signatures last week regarding the executive order on implicit bias that I mentioned earlier. Sometimes we're on the same side as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Sometimes we're on opposite sides. On this time, we were the same side. We put through a letter. You see on the screen there, that's a picture of 6 different senators, 3 Republican, 3 Democrat from, and if you look at the political spectrum, they are from the reddest red to the deepest blue on the spectrum, but they all agreed on the charitable deduction, the universal deduction. And we did a virtual town hall meeting. The 6 of them appeared on the program in early June, and it had a great effect. We are in the mix for a final bill. Don't know if we're going to be successful, but we're in the mix, and it was because the 6 came together and we were able to share them broadly. And then nonpartisanship is required, is necessary. And let's go to the next slide. Throughout my talking just now, I've been naming Republican and Democrats and doing that on purpose. We nonprofits are, by definition, by DNA, by law, nonpartisan. I'll jump to the bottom line there. The law that says we must remain nonprofit or nonpartisan to retain our tax exempt status is very much in effect today. The president and vice president have said it's been the Johnson Amendment. The law no longer exists. It very much does. And the law says 501c3 organizations may not endorse or oppose candidates for public office. It doesn't matter if it's a nonpartisan, they don't define themselves by party, like maybe a city council or something. If it's a candidate for elective office, you can't endorse or oppose. Same with contribute to campaigns, provide or divert assets to support individual campaigns and so forth. And in exchange, we can receive tax-exempt we can receive charitable donations. The people who give to us can get a tax deduction. The reasons are vital is to protect us from pressure. We don't want powerful politicians or donors or political operatives demanding that we do stuff and telling us how to divert our assets or compromise our missions for their personal benefit. It also keeps us as honest brokers in our communities. By that, I mean, There are good Republican ideas, there are good Democratic ideas, there are good independent ideas, and we don't have to only pick one group. We can amalgamate the best ideas. We can bring in good thinkers from all sides to solve problems. We are problem solvers in the communities, and we can't have politics prevent us from putting blinders on us. So nonpartisanship is vital, and I wanted to be sure and put a plug in for it. Next slide, please. If there are questions, I'd like to answer them, but this slide right here I have shared with an audience or two, a LANO audience or two in the past. I didn't change it, I don't think. Those are the usual things. If you are a nonprofit person and you think, oh, advocacy is someone else's job, actually, we're all doing it every day. If you're talking to a donor, you're telling the good news or the good story about your mission. If you're talking to a newspaper, you're bragging about what you do. We're all advocates for our mission. Focus here has been on public policy advocacy, but it all fits together. These are the things that have typically worked: sharing your impact, putting yourself in the context of the broad nonprofit community. We're 10% of the workforce. I'm not sure what the number, I didn't look about what your percentage is for the Louisiana workforce, but it's big. LANO has some great resources, has done some great research in the past on the nonprofit community. It's also important to get out of your subsector and get out of your silo, because others can accomplish great things too. Building relationships is vital. Treating advocacy as core. Pushing back, not letting government just tell you what for, but to say, this is important to my mission. I'm vital to the community. This is what we need to do. Christian, welcome back.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been so eye-opening, and just a lot of really good information out there, a lot of up-to-date information I think a lot of us needed. And I think my takeaway today, a lot of it, and I keep telling people over and over again, your voice matters. Large, small, medium size organization, your voice matters, and it's important that people hear you. And we have to get our stuff out there. And this is very helpful. And I think people across our state, especially now, especially with the hurricanes and the pandemic that we have faced and that we've been through here in Louisiana, it's important that our needs are met and that people are out there explaining what they need and how they need it, and to talk to those people that need to hear it. So that's fantastic.
Terrific. Let me add to that, since we have a minute. A lot of people, sometimes people are intimidated by elected officials or think that they're important and you're not. A secret, but that I wish was not a secret, they are intimidated by people with commitment and passion and know why they're doing stuff. It's one thing to make a lot of money. It's another thing to commit your life to a mission in your community. I keep saying this, nonprofits are problem solvers in the community. You were probably there before they were elected. They tend to be generalists. They can't dig deep into things. They learn from you. If you have a powerful story or an awesome statistic, that's what they're going to remember when the day's over, and that's what they're going to bring up when they're talking to other people. They want to sound like experts, and when they pick up this stuff from you, and they believe you, and they know that you are speaking out of passion and commitment, whatever you say to them can be multiplied the 12 times they tell the story and so forth. They're somewhat intimidated by you, and you can use that to your advantage.
Absolutely. And with 14,000 plus nonprofits in our state, I think we have a lot to say. So it's important to get out there. David, this has been fantastic. We sincerely appreciate you being here with us. And again, his slides will be presented in PDF and shared at next week when our videos are posted. Again, if you would like to reach out to him or anybody at the National Council, please reach out to us if you don't have their contact information. And remember, if you're members of LANO, you're members of their organization as well. So that's a great piece to have in your back pocket. So thank you so much, David. We truly appreciate it. We're going to end the sessions, but I hope that everyone joins us again for the next step. We're going to have a mini session with Ethan Bush, the 225 Gives. And just remember that that is mostly for the Baton Rouge area, but the idea can spread throughout the state. So take his ideas and move on with it. After that, it's Maxine Crump, and then we're going to do our post game with Joan Cronin. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate all of you being here, and we will see you in about 15 minutes. Thanks again, David. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.